pleasure. Okay, then the text goes on and to speak about how the Tathagata, the Buddha, further trains the disciple. First, he trains them in the sila, that is, in the principles of good behavior, good conduct. And he says, be restrained by the patimokkha, that's the code of monastic rules, seeing fear in the slightest faults, train by undertaking the precepts. So we have the stage of observing the precepts, the moral training. Next comes the training in restraint of the sense faculties. Again, this is a standard passage. Then comes 17, training in being moderate in eating and reflecting before taking food. Paragraph 18, we have the next task is the training in wakefulness. Be devoted to wakefulness. So spend the day walking back and forth and sitting. This is in meditation. Purifying your mind of obstructive states. In the first watch of the night, you continue with your meditation. Sleep in the middle watch of the night. In the last watch of the night, that is the pre-dawn hour of the morning, again, one gets up, continues the meditation. So this is the training in wakefulness. Then paragraph 19, we have the training in mindfulness and full awareness, or mindfulness and clear comprehension. This is practicing mindfulness and clear awareness in all activities in everyday life. Maybe I'll ask if there's any questions at this point. Yes, please. I just want to say that I'm going a bit quickly through these passages on the graduated training because we've covered them in other suttas in past classes in quite extensive detail.
Testing.
Yeah. Excuse me? Yeah, I think it's good to use that microphone, so.
Paragraph 13-14.
Yeah.
The last line is, for gods and humans cling to the 5 cords of sensual pleasure.
Yeah.
So I was a little unclear about the gods and humans in the same phrase and what is he referring to?
Yeah, this is referring to, you see, in the Buddhist cosmology, there are, above the human realm, there are a number of celestial or heavenly realms which are inhabited by the beings who are called devas in Pali. And the devas is what is translated as gods. Now these gods in the heavenly realms, the devas, also have their own type of sensual pleasures. They're said to be subtler, more refined than the sensual pleasures in the human world, but they also enjoy beautiful sights, sounds, fragrances. I think they also have celestial food. Anything further? Okay, so let us continue then. Okay, so now, after the disciple has been practicing this mindfulness and clear comprehension, now it said the Tathagata disciplines him further and says, Now, monk, go to a secluded resting place. And he mentions the forest, the foot of a tree, a mountain, and so forth. And so the monk now goes to the secluded resting place. After his alms round, after the meal, he sits down, crosses his legs, and he begins his meditation by abandoning the 5 hindrances, overcoming covetousness or sensual desire, ill will or hatred, dullness and drowsiness, sloth and torpor, and restlessness and remorse, and doubt. There's a little bit, I would say, here, what I call some element of incongruity or a little inconsistency, in that paragraph 18 speaks about the disciple as practicing wakefulness. So he's practicing meditation almost the whole day. And then it comes down to paragraph 20 and 21, where the Buddha is saying, now you go off into seclusion and practice meditation to overcome the 5 hindrances. So it seems like both paragraphs are really saying the same thing in different ways. I think this comes about because the sutta is bringing together 2 different schemes, 2 different outlines of the gradual training, and they don't quite mesh perfectly. Like in the version that we get in Sutta number 27 and number 51, it doesn't include the passage on wakefulness, because the wakefulness is actually what is being practiced when one goes to that secluded resting place. Like in what seems to be the more standard version of Sutta 51, we get restraint of the sense faculties. This is on page 450. In paragraph 16, we get restraint of the sense faculties. Then paragraph 17, we get mindfulness and clear comprehension. Then paragraph 18, we get the disciple going to the secluded dwelling place. And paragraph 19, the overcoming of the 5 hindrances. So it seems that this sutta is trying to, probably in the process of oral transmission, some reciters inserted the passage on wakefulness and maybe moderation in eating and wakefulness into the sequence, so that they don't quite fit in harmoniously there. Okay, now we get to something which is rather puzzling and yeah. It's actually Ananda's. Yeah, we have moderation in eating and wakefulness there, but you see, that is not presenting the gradual training as the same sequence. So there it fits in without any kind of friction there. But here it doesn't quite fit in. It's a little bit like fitting, is it a round peg into a square peg into a round hole? Number 39, well, I don't want to get off course, but 39 has a sequence on the gradual training. Yeah, actually 39 has a sequence on the gradual training which is similar to the one in number 125. Okay, but now let us continue. This is where we get a rather unusual passage with number 22. we read, having thus abandoned these 5 hindrances, imperfections of the mind that weaken wisdom, he abides contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully aware and mindful. He abides contemplating feelings as feelings, mind as mind objects as mind objects, dharmas as dharmas, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. And then we have this compared to the way the elephant tamer trains the elephant by binding it to a post in the ground. So he says, just as the elephant tamer plants a lodge post in the earth and binds the forest elephant to it by the neck in order to subdue his forest ways, so these 4 foundations of mindfulness are the bindings, or we could even say the post, for the mind of the noble disciple in order to subdue his habits based on the household life, to subdue his memories and intentions based on the household life, to subdue his distress, fatigue, and fever based on the household life, in order that he may attain the true way and realize Nibbana. So what's extremely unusual in this sutta is for the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness to be introduced after the abandoning of the 5 hindrances. Because elsewhere, in other suttas, the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness is presented as one of the ways for overcoming the 5 hindrances. So this is what raises some suspicion that what has taken place in the transmission of the sutta in the Pali tradition is that passages from other suttas have been inserted into the sutta in a way which doesn't quite fit. And then the stages, as I said, that there's a Chinese parallel to the sutta. This is Majjhima Agama number 198. And that presents the stages of training in this way. After the introductory passage on the appearance of the Buddha in the world and his teaching the Dhamma, and then the disciple goes forth into the monastic life. His training is stated very simply as he guards his behavior of body, speech, and mind, and purifies his livelihood. And from there, it moves directly into the training in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So this is the way it goes in the Chinese translation. It says, at first the Tathagata tames that monk and says, you should maintain purity of livelihood in body, maintain purity of livelihood in speech, purity of livelihood in mind. When the noble disciple maintains purity of livelihood in body, in speech, and in mind, then the Tathagata further tames the monk thus. You should contemplate the body as the body internally, etc. Contemplate feelings, contemplate the mind, contemplate the dharmas. In order to, and then it says, these 4 establishments of mindfulness are what is called a settling of the noble disciple's mind, binding that mind, to control intentions of delight in the household, to discard thoughts of desire for the household, to stop household weariness, so that he delights in the right dharma and in developing noble conduct. Okay, so here we go directly from the stage of training in the moral discipline or in right behavior to training in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And so it seems to have happened with the Pali version is that because the sequence on the gradual training is familiar from other sources, it came to be inserted into the sutta through the process of oral transmission. But it makes sense, in fact, to me it makes more sense to go directly from the training in moral discipline to go directly into the training in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Because that has a closer parallel to the training of the elephant. Okay, then paragraph 23 applies the simile of how the elephant trainer plants the post in the earth and binds the elephant to it, to the way the 4 foundations of mindfulness serve to bind the mind of the noble disciple and to help the disciple overcome the thoughts the thoughts run back to the worldly life. And this is quite, natural in the process of training, by the way. When first leaves the household life to become a monk or a nun, the mind will be thinking about all of the enjoyments that have been left behind. And so one has to find a way to train the mind, to bind it to enjoyment or delight in the monastic life. And it's the 4 foundations of mindfulness that serve that purpose. Okay, now we continue further. Okay, now the Tathagata disciplines the disciple further. He says, "Come, monk, dwell contemplating the body as a body, but do not think thoughts of sensual desire. Abide contemplating feelings as feelings, mind as mind objects as mind objects, but do not think thoughts of sensual desire." Okay, so this is indicating how one overcomes the 5 hindrances through the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And this seems to me to be further proof that the original sequence should go from the training in good behavior directly into the training in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Because in the Pali version, the abandoning of the 5 hindrances was already mentioned. And the first of the 5 hindrances is sensual desire. So if the disciple has already abandoned sensual desire and the other hindrances, then there's no need for the Buddha to mention, do not think thoughts of sensual desire. But because the Buddha is mentioning this, this indicates that at this stage for the disciple, the 5 hindrances are still present. So his mind is tied down to the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but thoughts of sensual desire and also the other types of hindrances will arise. Thoughts of ill will, dullness and drowsiness, restlessness, doubt. But as, excuse me, as one goes on contemplating in accordance with the 4 foundations of mindfulness, then the mind settles down, becomes quiet, is able to overcome distracting thoughts, And in this way, one eliminates the 5 hindrances. Okay, now we come to another interesting and controversial passage in this sutta. This is paragraph 25. It says, with the stilling of applied and sustained thought, he enters and abides in the 2nd jhana, the 3rd jhana, the 4th jhana. Why should this be such an unusual and controversial passage? Exactly. We don't see mention of the 1st jhana here. And on the basis of this passage, I know some people argue this is proof that the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness takes place in the 1st jhana, or that when you're practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, that is the equivalent of the 1st jhana. And therefore, they argue, in order to practice the 4 foundations, because the 4 foundations of mindfulness comes here rather than the 1st jhana, this shows that the 4 foundations of mindfulness is the equivalent of jhana, and therefore you can't practice the 4 foundations of mindfulness unless or until you achieve the jhana. So on this one very unusual, unique passage, it occurs only in this sutta, a lot of arguments are being built up on very momentous issues about the place, whether jhana is necessary or not, the relationship between jhana and the 4 foundations of mindfulness. But if we look at the Chinese version, it says that, now the noble disciple is following the instructions of the Tathagata. Then we come to the next passage. When the noble disciple follows the instructions of the Tathagata, then the Tathagata further trains him. He says, you should dwell secluded from sensual desires, secluded from evil, unwholesome states of mind. Then there comes an abridgment, something to indicate the text is being abridged. And it just goes up and says, he attains and dwells in the 4th jhana, the 4th absorption. So we see here, this is where it requires a bit of skill in knowing how to read a Buddhist text, because often repetitive passages are condensed. So it starts off by saying, you should dwell secluded from sensual desires, secluded from evil, unwholesome states of mind. Now, if we see that phrase, what does it tell us? What? Not quite. I mean, it might be the case, but exactly. This is the beginning. You see, the suttas are preserved very much in formulas, fixed formulas, which occur, repeated from one sutta to another to another. So this is the fixed formula leading into the description of the 1st jhana. This you find in countless suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya. For example, you find a sutta number, let's see where you begin, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, you'll get it in Sutta number 4, Sutta number 19, 27, 50, 39, 51. Wherever you get the 4 jhanas presented, it begins with that little phrase, secluded from sensual pleasures, from unwholesome, from bad, unwholesome states of mind. Then it continues, he enters and dwells in the first jhana, which is accompanied by applied thought and sustained thought, which has joy and happiness born of seclusion. Then it goes on with the formula for the second jhana, third jhana, till you get the formula for the fourth jhana. But here, it's assuming that in the Chinese Majjhima Agama, that the full formulas would have occurred in earlier suttas. This is sutta number 198, very close to the end of the collection. And so it just uses the beginning portion of the first jhana formula, and then it ends by saying that he enters and dwells in the fourth jhana. So what you're getting here is just the normal, standard, ordinary, everyday formula for the 4 jhanas. So what must have happened with the Pali version of the sutta, I mean, you have to remember that the suttas are transmitted by oral transmission from generation to generation through memory and repetition. I think Venerable Nalio had some comment on this. Let me see if I could find it. Yeah, he says, in sum, on evaluating the 2 possible ways of explaining the difference between the 2 versions of this sutta regarding the first jhana, it seems probable that a loss of text has occurred in the Pali version, whereas the Chinese version appears to preserve the more original presentation that includes a reference to the first jhana. Okay, then we come to, with the fourth jhana, we come to another interesting difference between the 2 versions. Okay, in the Chinese version, it said that, well, first in the Pali version, it goes on from the 4 jhanas, it goes on to the 3, you call the 3 higher knowledges, the knowledge, the recollection of past lives, the divine eye that sees the passing away and rebirth of beings, and then the knowledge of the destruction of the defilements of the asavas. And then it says, that after attaining arahatship, then the monk is able to endure cold and heat, hunger and thirst, and so on. He is rid of all lust, hate, and delusion, purged of flaws. He is worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverence, worthy an unsurpassed field of merit for the world. Now, the Chinese version does not mention the 3 higher knowledges, but it ends the sequence with the attainment of the 4 jhanas. And then it said that when the disciple is established in the 4th jhana, then he is established in the state called imperturbability, which is the parallel in the training of the elephant, the last stage in the training of the elephant. Then, when the disciple is established in imperturbability, then he's able to bear hunger and thirst, cold and heat, mosquitoes and flies, being beaten with sticks, and so on. And the Chinese version doesn't mention that the disciple has eliminated lust, hatred, and delusion, but it's said that he's simply discarded all crookedness, fear, stupidity, and deceitfulness. He's become pure, settled in dust, free from dirt, free from filth. He's fit to be praised, fit to be revered, respected, fit for offerings, an excellent field of merit for gods and human beings. So it seems that the Chinese version is actually following the analogy of the elephant more closely than the Pali version is. And then in the last passage of the sutta, we have the statement about the death of the king's elephant. So it said that when the king's elephant dies in old age, undisciplined and untamed, he dies an untamed death. If he dies in middle-aged, untamed and undisciplined, he dies an untamed death. If he dies when young, untamed and undisciplined, then he's considered a young elephant that has died an untamed death. And so now the Pali version says, if an elder monk dies with his taints undestroyed, with the defilements undestroyed, then he is considered an elder monk who has died an untamed death. If a monk of middle status dies with his taints undestroyed, then he is considered a monk of middle status who has died an untamed death. If a newly ordained monk dies with his taints undestroyed, then he is considered a newly ordained monk who has died an untamed death. And then the opposite is said for one who dies with his taints destroyed. Now what's interesting is that the Chinese parallel doesn't speak about a monk dying either with the taints undestroyed or with the taints destroyed. But he just speaks about the monk dying as having been tamed or untamed. So it says, a young noble disciple who dies well tamed is said to have died a well-tamed death. A middle-aged noble disciple, an old noble disciple who dies well-tamed is said to have died a well-tamed death, or to have died while being well-tamed. So nothing is said in the Chinese version about the eradication of the asavas, of the defilements. And so in this way, it seems again that it's closer to the parallel of the elephant. Okay, and that brings us to the end of the sutta. If there are any quick questions that could be asked here, then we'll take them now in 5 minutes. If there are longer, more complicated questions, we come back again after lunch. We'll come back at 12:30. Then please bring up the more complicated question after the lunch. Richard? Please take the microphone.
That's off.
Yeah, it's working.
What? Oh, okay.
Yeah, please.
All right. On page 992, it stopped.
Yeah.
working. What?
No, it's working.
Okay. But it comes and goes. All right, on page 992, in the third paragraph, there's a confusion, or it looks to me like a confusion between the king's elephant of 12. The last sentence of the first paragraph is
I think it's better to maybe turn that off and speak loudly.
Oh, wait.
It's getting me all mixed up with... Mm. Okay. Okay, I see the... Okay, I see the problem. Okay. No. Okay, wait, just... Okay, in the third paragraph, then the elephant tamer addresses the elephant with words that are gentle. I have to check on this. It could be that it's the forest elephant that's being addressed. It could be that just through an oversight, the word aranyika, forest, was overlooked in the translation. Okay, wait. Let me come. Okay, now when we come to the sentence, now the king's elephant will live. The others are now regarding the forest elephant because it's been brought out into the open and has been subdued by the king or by the king's men. Now they're considering that elephant is now the king's elephant as well. Yeah. Yeah. This is the way the people are thinking about it, because he's been made the property of the king. He's been caught for the purpose of making him part of the... He has a lot of work to do. Kings have lots of elephants. Okay, last question, then we'll have to share the merits and go for... Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it would have been probably a Sanskrit. I mean, certainly a Sanskrit, whether it was a Buddhist, what they call a Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit, or, yeah, probably some form of Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit. Yeah. 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 Yeah, anyway, I think the original language of this would have been a kind of Buddhist Sanskrit. Okay, we will stop now and share the merits, and then you can go for lunch up the hill and then come back here. We'll meet again at 12:30. So I think you have the sheets for the sharing of the merits with the devas. Those are the deities, the bhutas or local spirits, the nagas or dragon spirits, and with all other beings. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabe devanumodantu sabha sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabe bhutanumodantu sabha sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabe satanumodantu sabha sampati siddhya. Bhavagupadaya vichihitato etantare satakai upapanna rupya rupicha asanya sanino tukha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting. Okay, then we stand and we do 3 half bows to the Buddha.